which of these two GoPro Anamorphic lenses is going to get you the best results, and how do you go about getting those best results? By the end of today's video, you're going to know which one is best for you, and you're also going to know how to get the best results with these lenses. So first, let's talk about the two lenses that I'm comparing today. The first one is this GoPro Anamorphic lens. This is the official GoPro Anamorphic, and this is produced and sold by GoPro. And as of May 2025, this anamorphic lens cost $150 US. And some things to know about this lens is this anamorphic lens can only be used on the Hero 13 Black. This anamorphic lens cannot be used on any other GoPro camera. Now, will this anamorphic lens work with GoPros in the future? If I had to guess, I would say probably, but I cannot say for sure, of course. So if you wanted to get this lens and you didn't already own the Hero 13 Black, the Hero 13 Black costs $430 as of May 2025. The other anamorphic lens I have here is a third-party lens, and this anamorphic lens is made by Neewer. And as of May 2025, the Neewer Anamorphic lens costs $70, but I have seen it often on sale for as low as about $40. In fact, currently at the time of making this video, the Neewer Anamorphic lens is $42 US. The Neewer Anamorphic lens can be used with the GoPro Hero 9, 10, 11, 12, and the Hero 13. Next, let's talk about limitations and considerations with these two anamorphic lenses. Starting with the GoPro Anamorphic lens, as I already mentioned, this lens can only be used with the Hero 13 Black. But when using this anamorphic lens from GoPro, you can have Hypersmooth on, and you also will have your footage de-squeezed inside the Hero 13 Black. So you don't have to do any de-squeezing later on when editing. This also means there's no gimbal required to use the GoPro Anamorphic lens combined with the Hero 13 Black. With the Neewer Anamorphic lens, some considerations and limitations. First of all, you will have to have Hypersmooth off when using this lens. And that is because Hypersmooth does not know how to read the output from this lens, so it doesn't really know how to stabilize it properly. And you're going to get that very jello-y effect, and your footage will be unusable. So you do have to have Hypersmooth off when using the Neewer Anamorphic. When using the Neewer Anamorphic, you will also have to be in either linear or narrow for the lens setting. And that's simply because if you're not, you're going to see black on either side of the frame where the footage was not captured because this lens is not wide enough to support wide or super view or anything wider than that on the GoPro. And of course, since you will have to have Hypersmooth off with the Neewer lens, if you are doing any movement with your GoPro while you have the Neewer Anamorphic lens on, you will either have to have a gimbal or you will need to have a GoPro Premium Plus subscription so that you can stabilize this footage later on. And a GoPro Premium Plus subscription does give you access to the ability to apply Hypersmooth in post-production. And I have tested it with this Neewer Anamorphic lens, and it does a really good job. The cost, of course, is $99 a year for a GoPro Premium Plus subscription, but do keep in mind that the GoPro Premium Plus subscription does offer you features like unlimited cloud storage, and it does offer you $100 off the newest GoPro. In addition, you do get a discount on accessories, up to 10 of those accessories per year. So depending on how often you upgrade your GoPro or how many GoPro accessories you buy, or if you want the GoPro cloud storage, that $99 could already be offset in different ways. Now, if you do choose to use a gimbal, unfortunately, the weight of this lens combined with the GoPro and the battery, it is a little bit over 200 grams. And what that means is this does eliminate some gimbals like the Hohem iStudy Pro 4 from being an option. And that's because that gimbal can only support up to 200 grams of weight. And this lens also is very solid, so it makes the camera front heavy. I've tried it on the Hohem iStudy Pro 4, and it will support it sometimes for a couple seconds, but then the gimbal head will just flop forward, and unfortunately it won't work. So you will have to have a higher cost gimbal. For the sample shots in this video today, I did use the DJI RS4 Mini, and I used this simply because I already own it, but there are some lower cost gimbals as well that you can use. One of my favorites is the Fiutech Scorp Mini 2, and I'll link to a video above where I did a full review of that gimbal, but that is my favorite gimbal to use with action cameras, and there's a couple different reasons. One is the cost is only a little bit over $200, but in addition, it will support all of the action cameras I own, and it does a really good job stabilizing them for the cost and the size. So if you're interested in learning more about that gimbal, I'll link to it above. I won't get into all those details in this video, but that is the gimbal I recommend if you want to go the gimbal route. One final consideration if you use the Neewer Anamorphic lens is you will have to manually de-squeeze the footage later on when editing. Now, de-squeezing the footage is not hard. You can select all of your clips and you can apply the de-squeeze in a couple steps. It's super easy, but it is an additional step to keep in mind. But the nice thing is you can take the footage out of your GoPro before it's de-squeezed, and you can apply the Hypersmooth Pro in the GoPro app if you have that GoPro Premium Plus subscription, like I already mentioned. And then you would just de-squeeze after that. So next, let's take a look at the footage I captured using these lenses and these cameras side by side. So first of all, for the GoPro Anamorphic lens, I of course use this on the Hero 13 Black because that is my only option of camera I can use it on. But with the Neewer Anamorphic lens, I had this on the Hero 11 Black. I wanted to choose a GoPro that was a couple gens old, just to give you an average GoPro to represent how this footage might look. And for the lens setting on the Hero 13 Black, I had it set to ultra linear. This is my favorite lens setting to use with the anamorphic lens on the Hero 13 because it gives you that wide look, but it does minimize some of the distortion. But as you'll see in a moment, there is still some distortion, and some of it is a particular type I don't really like. And then with the Neewer lens, I did use the linear lens because I wanted it as wide as possible, narrow of course as an additional crop, but I did want it as wide as possible for comparing the perspective on both of these cameras. But as far as the other settings go, I used all of the same settings with both cameras. I used the same color settings, the same sharpness, the same ISO min, ISO max. Shutter was set to auto. So let's take a look at the footage from both of these cameras. For some of this footage, I am going to show it side by side, but then I'm also going to show the footage in the full frame for each camera because it is important that you be able to see the edges, because that is where distortion and softness and any vignetting are likely to occur with these lenses. So when looking at this footage side by side, the first thing I noticed is the GoPro Anamorphic lens with the ultra linear. It is a wider frame of view than the Neewer Anamorphic lens. But if you look at the sides, there is a lot of distortion along those edges, and there is a lot of softness as well. In fact, I was surprised at how soft the GoPro Anamorphic lens is. But if you look at the Neewer footage, it isn't quite as wide, but it does have a lot less distortion at the edges, and it is not nearly as soft. There is some softness there, but it's actually a lot sharper than the GoPro at those edges. Looking at the rest of the frame, the clarity and detail are pretty similar between both of these lenses. I don't really see a remarkable difference there. If I was really zooming in and trying to pick one, I think I would say the Neewer is actually a little bit better clarity and detail than the actual GoPro Anamorphic lens. And of course, there is a more subtle advantage to consider if you are using the Neewer Anamorphic with a GoPro with Hypersmooth off. And that is that if you're in lower light or if you're walking into shade in the forest, like I did with a lot of these samples, you don't have to worry about the jitter and ghosting that you could get with Hypersmooth on. And that's because you get jitter and ghosting when the shutter speed gets too slow, and your GoPro is going to slow down the shutter speed when you get into lower light in order to properly expose that image and in order to not have too much noise and grain from a higher ISO. So the footage where I walked into the shade, I feel like it looks really good with the Neewer and the Hero 11. There's of course no jitter and ghosting because Hypersmooth was off, and I stabilized it with a gimbal. But if you look closely at the Hero 13 with the GoPro Anamorphic, there is some jitter and ghosting. You can see a little bit of that there, and it doesn't look very good. And it was a little bit overcast that day, but it was the middle of the day. It was late morning. But even that, it got dark enough for that small sensor that the shutter speed slowed down all the way to 1/60, and that did create jitter and ghosting. Now, is that footage from the Hero 13 still usable? Absolutely. The jitter and ghosting is not so bad that I wouldn't be able to use it, but it is something to keep in mind if you're going to use these in low light. And here are a couple other samples to look at just so that you can get a good readout of how both of these cameras did. And I'm going to label all the samples on the bottom so that you know which one came from which camera. So the big question then is, which of these anamorphic lenses will get you the best results? Looking at this footage side by side, I can definitively say that the Neewer Anamorphic footage does look better. But of course, using the Neewer lens, there are trade-offs and limitations. You will have to have hypersmooth off, you will have to use either GoPro Premium Plus or a gimbal, and you will have to do a little bit of de-squeezing when editing. But if you don't already own a Hero 13 anyway, you can't use the GoPro Anamorphic lens currently. So if you own anything between the 9 and the 12, the Neewer Anamorphic lens is a really solid choice. If you own the Hero 13, you can use the Neewer Anamorphic lens on it, or you can get the GoPro Anamorphic. So you have both options with the Hero 13. And then I think the final consideration to make is, do you even need anamorphic footage? In other words, do you want that footage that is that slightly wider look, but still fairly linear? Because yes, you can add the black bars later on with normal GoPro footage, and you can kind of get that look. But the thing is, you're going to be losing resolution at the top and the bottom. Your black bar is going to be covering it. It's not going to be keeping what was captured with that whole frame like it's going to with an anamorphic lens. And if you'd like to learn more about how to get the very best with your GoPro action camera, check out this playlist right here.
All right. There you go.